What's that? Yeah, we record this. Yeah, because there are people who like to watch it on. It's great recording. And excuse me, everybody, we need to have a fair blow. You know, that's so the class. We're doing this, it meets every week, so. And conversations about the prayer.
Yeah.
What are you gonna do in life? Oh, wow.
During everything.
It's like today is a quiet day. Quiet.
Yeah.
The energy feels a little quiet.
Probably Mel.
He's good with that. He's good with that.
Yeah.
True, yeah, that's true.
Of the skit that you and no, there's I put it out there on
What's the date?
Oh, yeah. Family posted something.
I'm trying to see taking beginning to end.
Yeah, I don't know, I haven't seen,
Mhm.
but that was a lot of fun.
Doing that,
Yeah.
and the two of you together were really good.
Yeah, Howard is an amazing. comedian.
Mhm.
He like, he plays like here.
Well,
Wow,
He said he's been playing since he was 5.
we were scheduled
that's rare we can do that.
Yeah.
for a few weeks. I'm sure we're okay.
That's like, I don't know if you know Frank Abrams, it's has perfect pitch.
Oh, really? How do you?
I don't know, it's just over the, I've done that over the years.
Yeah, I have a bad
Yeah, it's perfect.
over.
That's what you can tune your instrument and it's
I
pretty.
guess,
Urgent care, tested.
And she's on advice,
No,
they didn't do
I
it.
try not to go on antibiotics. I let my body fight it.
And a cough for 5 weeks.
Huh?
You had a cough for 5 weeks. Me too. Are you going to also now? Yeah. Oh, wait,
No, not COVID.
Linda, how are you doing?
good, how are you?
I'm all right, thanks. Alfred, things good?
Can't complain, how are you doing?
Good, thank you.
Enjoy the person.
Oh, good, but
Yeah.
I thought it was fun too.
You only got to like a lot.
You're playing with that with the
I drink hot water with honey.
Look back and some of that.
Yeah.
Not better than she.
How come the temple doesn't give out like a bag of goodies and stuff for them?
We do 70 and over.
Oh, I have to be 70.
Yeah.
My mother,
Actually,
my mother said to me, she lived down the he says, you know, Mom, was that you that read? She said, did somebody ring your doorbell at 9:30 last night? No. He said, well, you know, it said happy Passover. I said, wrong, Mom. It's gotta say happy Purim. And she got 2 home.
To Mama Coffin.
That's the week.
Yeah, yeah, we had a big, coordinated effort to deliver, bags, so I remember there were 70 in over.
Getting there.
Don't
Right,
worry,
67.
year and a half.
Ah,
3
Yeah.
years.
3 years.
I got a year and a half. Well, 2 years, because I gotta wait for firm.
Oh, yeah.
It's the only.
It was just Sunday. Thank you.
And I worked with Howard Reed, they used to be committee, and they would put together, and you would give somebody else. So I got one that's being in place, that I work with. Take that,
Nice.
but that's like a whole reduction.
Yeah, it's a big effort.
So he's not, and I think she moved away, I was like, that's a guy. Please, you know, I'm doing this. I feel better. What? But anyway,
Nice,
so it's still. We brought back, maybe. I don't know. That's fine. Yeah, I suppose it's aware of it. Then it's like that day. Happy birthday.
Bonnie, your birthday was over the weekend, right?
Sunday.
How was it? You're welcome.
I'll show you how it was. Don't be jealous. Be jealous.
I'm jealous I wasn't invited.
Ah. No, you have to be a man child.
Ah,
But my adult children took me out to.
oh, nice.
No,
Where is that?
that's at 388. It's crazy.
I know.
388. Is that a great name?
Listen, Avenue.
It's a real scene.
Oh, wow.
What is it? 388 Italian restaurant. Delicious. It's like, it's all family stuff. You know, if you want to go there. There was a family style on Rolls Avenue.
Yeah.
I wonder if it's a sub place.
No, La Palma.
You think
Further
further
up.
up Teos?
No, La Palma.
This is much better, delicious.
Hmm.
As my grandmother would say, it's a heg dish. You know what a heg dish is?
I know what that is.
What?
A lot of confusion running around yelling and screaming.
Right. That's a Yiddish word, heg dish.
Egg dish. Huh.
My grandparents spoke Yiddish and I spent a lot of time with them growing up. The look word.
Egg dish.
See that.
Lot of excitement running around.
Spooky is going on in the world today. I don't know, like none of our online participants are on.
Yeah, I don't see myself, Rabbi.
I don't know. We had this in Nimby too. People were just gone.
Yeah, the strange expected day, nobody here.
No, what's going on?
Did anybody show up?
I mean, yeah, but it was fewer. And now our normal participants online, no, we don't have anyone.
Maybe they're all taking a swim.
Yeah,
No, it's no.
Try going on.
Oh, Florida, no.
Yeah.
In Florida? Swimming in Florida?
Right.
Hmm. Maybe.
Is there a thing with the lake or the?
Maybe we're at the wrong side.
It's just unusual. I don't know, I think like, every now and then you get these days where it's just like, nobody's around.
It's not.
Yeah, just try going.
What's that?
Set up.
I don't think so. I think.
Listen, we're here.
Yeah, I don't know, it's just odd. There's a usual group of people that want, and not a single one of them is here, so, I don't know. Okay, that's.
No.
There's a lane, you're there.
All right, so it's working. All right, I'm gonna go out of it.
You got somebody?
No, it's fine, I tested it.
It's testing.
Want to make sure it was working.
Yeah, you can just drop off. Yeah,
Trying to do that.
so. All right, good morning, everyone. Boker Tov. We will begin with our blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asot b'divrei Torah. All right, so we're going to continue with Ma Tovu today. I want to look at, we spent the last time really on that first couplet of Ma Tovu. I'd like to kind of look at just at the rest of them today, which are, are much lesser known kind of passages. But remember, all of these, and we're on page 30, all of these are biblical verses, which the sages who put the prayer book together selected these verses and wove them together into a unitary piece of liturgy. We're on page 30. Here, page 30. Good morning, Lee. So we're on page 30. All right. So before we dive in, were there any thoughts or questions from last week that you wanted to raise?
Well, I would just say this, it occurred to me that this prayer is like a preview or a sketch or just a listing, I don't know the right word, it like highlights all the features in a prayer service. Starting with people, you need people.
Yeah.
And then it goes, I think you need people. But then it goes to adoration, thankfulness, appreciation, and it ends up with requests.
Okay.
Like Mr. Vera. So to me, it was like almost like the footnotes of the service.
Oh, that's nice. That's very nice. So just to summarize what we did last time in unpacking that Ma Tovu, the first couplet, we talked about the individual and the communal dimensions of prayer reflected here in the verse. Yaakov and Yisrael are both Jacob. There's two names. Yaakov represents his individual identity, while Israel represents the communal collective identity. Ohalecha, the Ohel is the tent, the individual family dwelling, versus the Mishkanotecha, the Mishkan is the tabernacle, the sanctuary, which is the place of communal dwelling. And we talked based on that passage in the Talmud about when Balaam, who's the one that the prophet who speaks these words, meaning to curse Israel, but actually ends up blessing them. He's looking out from the heights, he's looking out into the camp, and he sees the tents of Israel with the the openings to the tent are not directly facing each other. And so we talked about that having kind of signifying the, how the tradition respects and understands the importance of both the private domain and also the public domain. Because the tents are all together, the Mishkan is there, and yet there's privacy preserved. And in the prayer service, we have both communal prayer and also private prayer. And they're both really important. And I quoted from Rabbi Stoller last time in talking about how he says that the private prayer is critical into the worship experience, because for every human being, there are elements about ourselves that we simply cannot share with anyone. No other person, not even the person closest to you. And that private prayer is a part in the prayer service where you interact with God and God alone. And the rest of it is the communal. And we talked about the two axes of the three axes of the prayer experience. The vertical y-axis representing the relationship between the individual worshiper and God. The x-axis representing the relationship amongst the people who are there. Horizontal. And then somebody had pointed out that there's a z-axis too, which perhaps represents the relationship between the community as a collective and God. So that's a summary of what we talked about last time. Yeah, Beth.
You said that, there's some things you cannot share with another person. That theme was discussed in, your speech. I've heard it several times.
Yeah, I did. I think I did.
Yeah, so I'm wondering, where, does that come out of the Torah, or does that come out of readings? But isn't
That's something that Rabbi Joseph Soloveitchik writes about on one of his books. Yeah. Lee.
The week that we were on vacation and that camp out in Lebanon. And he noted, we were just did those first line. And he was saying that if one were to enter a congregation, small, large, whatever, and there were already two people there, if they had put on their talasium, it might look like tents.
Oh, okay, cool.
You know,
I thought of
if they put it on and you're coming in, then, you know.
Oh, it's a
in
same
a
motto.
typical, like,
Yeah,
scene.
that's cool. I like that. I had not heard that before. Yeah, Courtney.
In your opinion, do you find that perhaps when we gather together as a community and pray together, it's not that it's a facade, but it's more about appearance, whereas if you converse with God solely alone, and you pray to him, it's also more authentic.
Well, I think in the Jewish, philosophy of prayer, both of those dimensions between the individual relationship with God and the individual relationship with the people amongst you are equally important. That's where we get the concept of minyan. So minyan is 10 required for the fullest expression of prayer. So while individual prayer is definitely important and something that you should do, the ideal way of praying in the Jewish way is in a minyan. Yeah. Shelley, go ahead.
Hey, good morning. So you're talking now about, the individual and then the community. And I just was kind of laughing because with the all Zoom minyan in the morning, of course, now there's the chat. And often we have a pretty lively chat going on, particularly if it's after something that happened or a reflection or whatever, right? And so and so some people say, well, that's not praying. You're reading the chat. You should just pray. And for me, I read the chat because this is my community. But sometimes I'm like, yeah, but I haven't said any of the prayers yet, and I better make it speaker. So all I see is you. And then Vicky, our H and our minion, said something that I thought was so wonderful. She said, God is in the chat. And that's what you're saying. Isn't that great?
That's very nice. Yeah, there, I mean, so the concept of minion, which we mentioned last time, is that when you have a minion, a community of 10 or more, it constitutes an entity that is greater than the sum of its parts. Which has a certain, it just being part of a minion is different from simply being a part of a collection of individuals who happen to be in the same space or, you know, there's something more. There's a I don't know, an energy, a cohesion, a transcendence, something that happens when a minion is constituted that enables the prayer experience to be fuller. Okay, Vicky.
I just want to pick up on what Shelley, her observation about the chat. In a way, it makes absolute sense because, excuse me, if we were to meet together, you know, one-on-one in person, that chat would actually have been our conversation with each other.
Yeah.
And we can't do that. While Rabbi Stoller is concentrated at praying and you know, and so we communicate this way in here. You know, and it adds to the conversation.
The bottle of water.
Of which we are not.
All the water is in my.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're not alone. And the conversation, I know you don't agree with me, Rabbi Stoller, but I always feel that when you speak to someone and you have a very deep, meaningful conversation, it is like a prayer, because if we believe that we are created in God's image, when we reach someone so deeply, it's like seeing God in that person.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, very nice, Vicky. Okay, so let's take a look here at the next passage in Machavu, which that second little paragraph is a verse from, it tells you, you look at the Siddur at the very bottom of the page in the small print, it tells you the sources of these different passages. So Va'ani Berov Chastecha, that's the next one, comes from Psalm 5:8. So let me put the Sfaria on the screen. And we'll go into Psalm 5:8, Psalms 5. Okay, and I as we're looking at this, I want you to notice, remember that what the authors of the prayer book did is choose these verses and kind of pulled them out of their particular context and wove them together into a piece of liturgy so that they have some coherence with each other in the way that it's created, but you know, they are taken partially out of their context in the Bible itself. So here, verse 8, Va'ani berov astecha avo vetecha eshtachave el hechal kodshecha b'yiratecha, and it's translated as, if you look in the book, let's follow the translation there in the book. It says, I, through your abundant love, enter your house. I bow down in awe at your holy temple. Okay. What are your thoughts just in reading the plain meaning of it? What are your thoughts on that, and why is it here? What's its relationship to what came before? And why is it here? its meaning in the context. Mel,
I'm using the word love here.
love,
You know, hate is love, so the road means love.
No, okay, so the Vani is I. Rove is translated here as abundant. Okay, the Hebrew word chasdecha, chesed is the word, chesed shelcha, your chesed. It's translated here as love. Chesed is also kindness. But here it's translated as love, perhaps because of the interpretive tradition, and I'll show you some stuff from that in a second. So, so what's the, so why love as opposed to kindness? Any thoughts? 'Cause it could be kindness. Courtney?
I think love has more depth than kindness. Kindness coincides with feeling love.
Okay, and and good, okay, and so kindness, can you say more? Like how is love have more depth?
I think that, I mean, I'm not quite sure, I'm not really well versed in meaning of all of it, but what I'm gathering is that, you know, if you love someone, that the kindness is inevitable, because that's an expression.
Kindness flows.
If your relationship is lacking kindness.
Okay, nice, kindness flows from love. Vicky and then Howard.
Something, it's your, meaning God's abundant love.
Right,
So it's through that they are even able to enter.
and enter what?
I'm sorry, your house. which
Yeah.
is the-
Yeah, exactly.
And that enables them to love.
Us enables us.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's not a them, this is us, remember, this is, okay, so we're coming into the synagogue, this is the first prayer of the service. And it's in God's, it's God's love that enables us to enter into it. Okay, good, that's a nice reading, so what does that mean? What does that, Howard, do you know?
I can go to the next step. You know, I'm allowed to do that. since
Sure.
I didn't do This one.
Go ahead.
But the first verse is referring to the individual Jacob. We talked about this already. The
Yeah.
individual Jacob and the community Israel. Now, all of a sudden, we're saying your house with a capital Y.
Yeah,
In your holy temple. And so, wait a minute, whose place is this? I thought this was the Israelites, the community's place, and now we're hearing that we're entering God's place. And I'm thinking about the inscription on outdoors, which is from Torah, which is let them build the sanctuary that I might dwell among them.
right,
So, build me a sanctuary that I may dwell among them. So, I mean, obviously, it kind of answers itself. It's the house of people in the house of God. But-
right.
but, yeah, but to me, there's a real switch here from the first to the second verse.
Yeah,
I think you're right, places.
Right, so that's very nice. It does add that dimension. It's the place of the people and the place of God. I want to show you something in the Bible here in Tanakh. When the temple is built, King Solomon builds the temple. And there's a passage here where it kind of deals with this question about the temple is God's house and so forth. Okay, so Solomon right here asks this question, but will God, let's see, okay, but will God really dwell on earth? Even the heavens to their uttermost reaches cannot contain you. How much less this house that I have built? So Solomon, even at the moment that he dedicates the temple, has this awareness that the idea of it being God's house is illusory in the sense that God can't live in a house. I mean, God is infinite, right? And so the idea of God living in a particular space is not, it doesn't make logical sense, and yet we build the temple and our temples and synagogues and, you know, and sacred spaces. And think of it as God's house and also the house where the people gather. So what can you say about that? What is, what's the significance of the place? Yeah, Vicky.
I think this was a starting point for God, because the people needed something tangible. After Moses went away, he understood, because the idea that God is infinite is something that the human mind cannot understand or even fathom.
Yeah.
So this is the starting place. They need a place. Of course, it's ridiculous. God is all over.
Yeah.
God is omnipresent, okay?
Yeah.
But the goal, God's, I don't want to think of it anthropomorphically, God's goal was to get us to then incorporate that, to make the place, not the mission alone, but to make the place within our heart, just as God condensed to allow people to enter. He wanted to make it ungodlike for people to have their space. He condensed himself to give them room. We then have to take God and place him within our hearts. It's like a portable mission. We carry it wherever we go. Our love for God must be within us.
Okay.
So there's the external and the internal. And I think the external was his starting point.
Okay, very nice. Nice, thank you. Shelley, go ahead.
Well, I think there's two things here. One of them is that this is really more for people, that we need an actual maybe house. We felt that we did, at least in America here, but that for many years that wasn't the case. And I even look, my second point is that I look at the younger generation who are not joining synagogues. But it doesn't mean that they're not looking for the best way to pray. And there's a place called this really wonderful group called Wilderness Torah, Passover in the desert, and they do all kinds of non-building related Jewish events, or in Chicago, Mishkan, which started out without a building at all. And you know about that. And it was hugely successful. And there are tons and tons of young people, all people, but young people in particular, that really connected with that. And so, what does that even mean? Your house? We get very attached to these things.
Yeah, and that's a nice point to just there's a certain poetic irony in when you made a reference, Shelley, to Mishkan, which is is Shelley's in Chicago. Mishkan is it's like a startup kind of congregation. One of these, like, there are a number of them around the country that they're congregations, but not in the conventional sense. So there's one in Chicago that started, and they call it Mishkan. And when they started, they had no building. I don't know if they have one. They don't. Okay, yeah. So it's a congregation without a building, but it's called Mishkan. So there's a poetic irony, and it goes, I think, along with what Vicky, you were saying about, the ultimately, like, we, the individual and the community, are the Mishkan. The world is the Mishkan. The physical building is also the Mishkan, but when it comes right down to it, it's not the physical space that contains God. And really, I think, like, there's a certain there's a tension within the tradition over physical space to begin with, because the idea that God can be contained in a building is, to the extent that we believe that, it kind of borders on idolatry, right? Because it suggests that God is limited and finite and, and then all the more like when, we adorn the buildings with all kinds of finery. The Mishkan itself, in the Torah, that when they built it, I mean, all of the instructions and everything, inlaying in gold and sapphires and all this kind of stuff is really, is indicative of the human impulse. And this is why idolatry is such a poignant issue in the Torah and even today. Because we as human beings have a certain kind of innate need to grasp onto tangible things that we can see and adore. But God is not that. God is abstract and infinite and invisible. And so even the Mishkan in the Torah is almost like kind of taking the idolatrous impulse and then just repurposing it toward the worship of, the God of Israel. Howard.
I was just thinking about the fact that one of the many names for God is Hamakom.
Yeah.
Which I think means the place.
The place, right.
There may have been a time when I knew more about that, but I'm wondering, what that derives from and what it means.
So it comes from Midrash, which describes God as the place of the world. So as opposed to a building being the place of God, God is the place of the world. The world exists within God, not vice versa. So that's I just finished reading this book, which I'm thinking about my brain parts of it for Torah study on Saturday. The book is it's called Pagans and Christians in the City, and the author kind of examines and compares kind of like classical paganism, the Roman and Greek paganism, with the monotheism embodied in Judaism and Christianity, and the worldviews that they represent. And what I learned from it is that the kind of the key difference, or maybe a defining difference between paganism and monotheism is that is the issue of transcendence, meaning God in monotheism, Judaism and Christianity, Islam, God exists in the world, but also, and more importantly, beyond the world. God is bigger than. So that's the idea of Makom. God is the place of the world. God, so by definition, God suffuses the world because the world is in God, but God is also much more than the world. And in theological language, the term is transcendent. God transcends the world itself. Whereas in paganism, divinity existed only within the world, not beyond it. And so the book is really kind of unpacking all the implications of that, which is really fascinating as just a way of being and thinking and experiencing the world. So the idea of the transcendent is super important to our religion. Which makes the question of the being of God's space a difficult one. So I want to show you as just a little detour, but I think it's relevant to this, because as we talk about the significance of space. So this is as an essay. It's a short essay, but I want to read it with you. Written by David Mamet. You familiar with David Mamet? He's a playwright, and he's Jewish. He's a Reformed Jew, lives in Boston. And he wrote, he has a book, a collection of essays, this comes from a collection of essays called The Wicked Son. And the essay is entitled The Poor Shul. So I want to read it, and because I think it relates to what we're saying. So he says, it's bigger. I should like to see any power. Oh wait, that's just his opening, yeah, it's an opening quote, it's cool. I should like to see any power of the world destroy this race, this small tribe of unimportant people whose wars have all been fought and lost, whose structures have crumbled, literature is unread, music is unheard, and prayers are no more answered. Go ahead, destroy that race, destroy Armenia. See if you can do it. Send them to the desert without bread or water, burn their homes and churches, then see if they will not last, sing and pray again. For when two of them meet anywhere in the world, see if they will not create a new Armenia. Opening quote. I met two wealthy Jews of my acquaintance who were visiting in a poor shul. It was Shabbos and the rabbi was giving them a tour. The efficient cause of their inquiry was plain, as I encountered them in a classroom of fifth graders. They had not come for the service, but to inspect the facilities for their child, to whom, to their credit, they wished to impart something of his heritage. But he was not going to have it imparted at this poor shul. Their fixed expressions told the tale of their fear, and their fear was that of contagion. The shul, again, was poor. It rented space from a Christian fundamentalist church near a freeway. Their faces showed they'd come to the very wrong place, and my hello, their panic. The man I saw was afraid I'd engage him in some sort of conversation, thus extending the length and, God forbid, the consequences of his very wrong decision. The shul, in his defense, had nothing to recommend, except that it was holy. And how could a casual, let alone a fearful visitor, recognize that? All sins, the rabbis tell us, are the sin of the spies or the sin of the golden calf. The man had come to the shul because he had been told that it was extraordinary. To what did it owe its reputation? To the excellence of its rabbi. That's why the prospect came. But he did not hear the rabbi, and he did not watch, let alone participate in the service, and he left in fear. The Israelites, we are told, created the golden calf not because they doubted Moses and his connection with God, but because they believed in it. The impending prospect of ultimate intimacy deprived them of their senses, and they reverted forcefully and determinedly to the limits of the known world. Their act and insistence that nothing existed beyond their experience. For these Israelites, if a God existed, and if Moses had gone up the mountain to hear God's command and to take it to the tribes, if this were true, those tribes would have to abandon most of the notions and behaviors that had ruled their lives and begin again with a new template. So they asserted in an act of wish fulfillment that it was not true. They did not believe in Moses or God, and proceeded to demonstrate their incredulity. Their demonstration then, the worship of the golden calf, was effectively a proof of their awe of God. As was the visitor's flight from the poor shul. For if the shul contained nothing but a congregation assembled to study the word of God, no marble, no gilding, just hard benches in a hot room, if this was sufficient, then to the prospect, something was terribly wrong with his life. So no, he concluded, it was not his life that was lacking, but the shul. How did I know? I knew because his reaction was not polite regret at being offered something he did not on reflection require. His reaction was not even disappointment, but politely hidden disgust. The shul lacked even the most basic amenities, maintenance, let alone opulence, and the display of plaques commemorating donors. What was the message? that wealth here was pointless. Financial support might be welcomed, but wealth was not worshipped. What advantage then to this successful man? Only the possibility of communion with the divine. See also the bachelor who manages to find in every potential mate something just a little bit wrong. This person may be accused of and may in fact grudgingly admit to that malady called fear of commitment, but that may be more truthfully characterized as greed. The perennial bachelor is afraid not of commitment, but of passing up any opportunity for unlicensed sex. He is afraid not of commitment, but of restraint. The fellow shopping for a good shul may have continued his search and found that organization whose best claim was that it would make no claim on his spirit. One can imagine his gratitude and its expression in monetary donation, which is why the great shul he visited was poor. What are your reactions to that? Bonnie?
Very sad,
Why?
very sad.
Why?
That's how he looked at the temple,
How? Can you describe it?
that it was poor, there were no plaques on the wall, you know, he was too rich, to even come in and possibly worship. I mean, very sad.
Okay, thank you, Vicky.
These so many, I can't keep it all in my memory, but I saw so many, it was so similar to the spies when they went to look at the land and, they ran away in fear. They said, oh, we were but grasshoppers, they were giants. So it was really their own deficiency. And they were afraid also of the responsibility that, you know, because now they'd have to go to a new land. They were used to God providing manna, everything was provided to them.
Yeah.
And they were really frightened that once wherever, you know, they went into this place, that then they would have to assume responsibility. It's like accepting, and they weren't ready for it.
Yeah.
You know, and the other thing, got it, Jensen. Yeah, and I'm sorry, that's all I can remember, but it was so rich.
That's a really nice connection between the sin of the spies and the sin of the golden calf.
And
Right, as he puts it in this essay, because he says the sages, he's referencing the Midrash, which says all sins are the sin of the spies or the sin of the golden calf. They're like the two medicines. And that you made a really nice connection. I hadn't thought of that before. So what is he? Let's see if we can just. Well, I mean, we could spend a whole hour on this essay, but I just want to kind of draw out what Mamet is kind of trying to say about physical space, because that's what we're looking into. Yeah, Courtney.
When we talk about, you know, physical, it's in keeping with what we discussed last week, where, you know, people being George and gold, I feel like the richness is not so much donations to the temple and the plaque and everything is so appreciated, but perhaps the weight and the rich is a reminder of God, about spiritual, you know, that maybe he was referring to.
Okay. Yeah, it is, I think it's, the danger in idolatry, like with the golden calf, is confusion of the thing with what it ostensibly represents. Okay, and that's like the fine line that the monotheism walks, and that divides monotheism from idolatry, is the love and worship and adoration of a thing versus the love, adoration, and worship of the power, the ultimate power behind the thing. Okay, so I think Mammon is pointing out that the man who comes into this poor place, he sees what he sees, and he says that there's, if this were to be enough, then it says that there's something terribly wrong with the man's life, because the man, sure, he's a successful person, he says, probably he lives, in an opulent home and has lots of material things around him. And that to him, the way he sees the world is that opulence and lots of material things is indicative of holiness. And that's what it is, indicative of what's good and what's right and sacred in the world. And so if he sees a synagogue that doesn't have that, then either the synagogue is right and his whole worldview and assumptions is wrong, or the synagogue is just a dump, which is how he rationalizes. So I think like it's relevant here to what we're saying about the physical space containing God, is that we do on the one hand have an impulse to build beautiful facilities as our synagogues and decorate it with the most beautiful adornments and everything. Because ostensibly, like the temple, like the Mishkan and the Torah, because we want to honor God. But it's also very easy to slip out of that original idea of the finery honoring God, and the finery existing for its own sake, becoming the object of worship in its own right. Okay, Howard.
A number of years ago, we had this project at the temple called Project to Be. And to some extent, it was connected with this concept of relational Judaism. And at the beginning, we were talking about having more in-depth conversations with ourselves. That, how much do we really know about each other, and how much do we really talk about the important things in life? And I think part of what's going on in Mammon's essay here is, wow, if I'm not going to be spending time involved with this place and the beauty of this place, I have to substitute something else for that. And something else is going to require me to maybe become more a more in-depth relationship with God or with the people that come to this place.
Yeah.
And that's scary. That's something I don't do.
Right.
Opens me up. And life is easier when it's more superficial.
Right.
That's
Yes, I agree. Yeah. So as it relates here to our prayer of Matovu, we kind of got into this idea of, well, this verse that we're studying is, it's through God's love and God's abundant love that I enter into the space. That's the statement of the verse. And we've started to kind of unpack like what is the space that we're entering? So does this help? Look back here at this line. I, through your abundant love, enter your place. I bow down in awe at your holy temple. What does this say to you now? And following the discussion that we've just had. Yeah, Vicky.
I think it's God-centered rather than, the emphasis is on God. It's a holy place. I thought it was funny when all he found in that synagogue was, it was just holy. You know what I mean? So, but here, the emphasis I think is on God, on the holy, and not the place itself, even though the mission was adorned and, that wasn't part of it. It was, I don't know.
Yeah, and Mamet says like, what makes the place holy? And in his description of the portal, what makes it holy?
Rabbi?
Yeah,
Hi.
go ahead.
Yeah. Going back, scientists more and more are realizing that we are vibrations, So when I go to temple and everybody's praying, I feel all the vibrations and I can transcend. So for me, the temple is a place that it contains our energies so we can elevate it. The other point is that people say, why should I join a temple? Well, guess my experience has been that the people that do not join a temple, that second generation, they do not practice Judaism. So if we don't have temples, no matter what, we need some structure to continue on. You can loosey, goosey do things that you can do. No, you can. You need a structure. And I think that's what the temple gives.
Okay, good.
The other thing that I want to point out, I know that people say that communicating while we are praying in the chat, that it is kind of communal prayer. For me, that's why I have my book, because I do not like to have the chat. For one thing, we know scientifically that we cannot have at the same time two cognitive tasks. So if I am in the emotional and the cognitive, using my cognitive skills, I cannot hold the two of them well. So I love talking to people. Everybody knows me, but for everything there is a place. And for me, that's why I use my book for that reason, because when I am really praying, that's one thing that I want to do. I don't want to do anything else because it just detracts.
Okay, good. So I think Mamet's point of what makes the place holy is the people gathered there, for learning and for praying and, real meaningful human to human interaction. I mean, all of that is the substance of the holiness and what we might say, like, it enables God to dwell in it.
Cantor's door. It's the cantor's door, and like caterer's door.
Oh, okay.
That's a good number.
Is what enables God to dwell in the place and what makes it holy. It's not the material things, but we very easily fall into golden calf worship, thinking that it's material things that make something holy. Okay, now.
I have a lot of thoughts. I actually had a run-in with Matt once. I forget exactly what it was. I ordered something, he didn't like it. To me, this is like a look back. The poor shul, the poor Jew, right, who went to the shul as a refuge rabbi, like the shul was like a refuge. And also, why did he pick Soroyan as an introduction to his piece? Soroyan is an Armenian, and that the famous story, Morgenthau, it was a Morgenthau, he was ambassador to Turkey, right? The Turks, it was a Holocaust against the Armenians, you see. And so Morgenthau spoke out against the Holocaust, the Armenians. That's why he put him in there. There's a relationship between Armenians and Jewish people. But to me, it's a look back. He's looking back at how it was. Now today, we don't like. I don't consider myself to be a poor Jew too much anymore. But the environment that I grew up in, like a lot of people, they carry them like a poor Jew, and they needed a poor shul. That's the thing. It's changed. Something's changed.
No.
Okay, all right, good. But I think the point though is that he's making it is not about like whether people are wealthy or not. It's just about how we relate to physical space and how we, conceive it. So here in Matovu, looking at this verse, so, and as it follows from the first one, remember, talked about the individual and the communal dimensions of prayer and the individual tent and the communal dwelling place. And now it's speaking about entering into God's house through God's abundant love. And it's the love of God that flows from God toward us and which flows from us toward God and on the y-axis, and also the love which flows amongst us on the x-axis that creates the holiness. It's not the physical space itself. So I want to show you, I'm just gonna translate this. This is a comment which I have on the screen. Over here from a commentator called Malbing, who was a 19th century commentator. So he says here, he says there's a big difference between the worship of God and praying to God and the worship of idols. Okay, he says, because the worshiper of an idol worships the idol, prays to it from the standpoint of fear. Okay, fear of bad things happening. And he wants to appease the idol so that bad stuff won't happen to him. Up to the point that his fear of bad things brings him into a place of vanity. But when he comes into that place and he sees that it's all like a falsehood, he loses his spirit. Okay, but now he quotes this verse, Ani baruch chastecha avo beitecha. Through your abundant love, I enter into your temple. At a time when I come into the temple of God, I do so not from fear, not out of fear of bad things happening that I want to kind of assuage there, but rather from the chesed of God, which is here like the love, which is spread out over all existence. A chesed which I can see when I look out onto all that is. And it's through that I come into God's temple. And then when I bow down at your holy temple, okay. I'm not doing so out of fear of evil and being damaged, but rather out of reverence, that comes from God's transcendence. Okay, so I was just translating on the fly there a little bit, but it's kind of, I think he's saying that why is love here important? It's God, it's the presence of God, the chesed, the love of God that suffuses everything, all of existence, which I can perceive when I look at the world and when I look at people, sort of that brings me into the synagogue. I come here from a place of love and reverence, not from a place of fear. And I think it's related to what Mamet was saying, because the man who's looking at the poor shul is living with this existential fear that like his material things are the mark of what his life is all about. And he needs validation of that, lest, he lose his whole self. And Courtney.
Just real quick, it's interesting that you just mentioned existentialism. And I just wondered, was he paradox? Was he so contrarian?
Who, Mamet? Oh, he is a contrarian.
And me?
Yeah.
That's why he's, it sounds like he's been kind of since great, because he actually had lack of words of audacity to write this.
Yeah, he does. No, the essays in his book are very, very sharp, like that one that we read, and I think really poignant and contrarian. And he's like, you can tell he relishes just like calling out, the stuff that nobody wants. But I think he's right. I think it's very powerful, and he's speaking to this broader thing that Malbing is saying about fear versus love. that this, and Matavu were saying, like, we're coming into this space and this community and so forth from a place of love that we feel from God all around us. And to engage in you know, in a sharing of human, you know, love and kindness with each other rather than seeking, you know, to appease a God, you know, lest that God take things from me or cause damage. That's it. And those are different religions.
Well,
Yeah, sure.
to me, Judaism makes a big effort to separate holy things from profane things.
Yeah,
And it's in every part of your life, whether it's Shabbat or whether it's clothing, food. And I think that's the way we would look at buildings. Some people would perceive, you know, a humble building as being profane because there's a lot of people in there with good spirit. Or other people might perceive the golden calf or a fancy building as something to them that, you know, speaks to them as being holy in terms of how they approach it.
yeah,
So that's the way I think of this.
right. It is, I think that there's a sharp distinction between sacred and profane, but I think what Mamet is saying and the whole, you know, kind of story of the golden calf, which is from this week's parashah, and this here in Matovu, is that that holiness doesn't exist in material things. That's a delusion. And that's the delusion of idolatry. You know, it's the holiness is in the connections of community and in the, you know, the conversation of study and the act of prayer. And for that, it doesn't matter what the physical surroundings. I mean, a synagogue in that sense is functional, only in the sense that, like, you have to have a place to meet. Right?
Rabbi?
But the elements, the adornments and so forth around it, that's not what holiness is about. But we have, human beings have a certain kind of innate impulse toward those things. You know, because we can see it, you know, you can grab hold to it, it appeals to the senses. And in the culture that we live in, the, you know, fine material things are symbols of prosperity, success, goodness, you know, all these things. So we associate holiness with that, but that is the fundamental error of idolatry. It's worshiping the things.
Rabbi? Oh, okay.
Yeah, 1 second, Martha. Go ahead, Vicky.
Society, because our worship tends to be the shopping mall rather than, no, it's, you know, we built our cathedrals as Jews is really it's the history, the time, the learning. We worship. That's what we worship. That's what we should worship. That's what Sabbath is about. To stop doing and becoming, but to just be, to be in the, I hate to say it, but to be in the moment.
Yeah.
To put all that away, to put it aside.
Yeah.
And of course, there is what makes the synagogue holy. What actually makes it holy is not, is the fact that it's not more holy, really, than any other space. It's just that when we're there are boundaries. And that's what separates the holy from the profane, as Stu pointed out.
Yeah.
And so we feel more connected in those spaces because I think we're setting aside the world. This little microcosm that is pure and devoted to God.
Yeah, it's all about like what happens in the place and what the spirit is that people bring to it. I mean, what makes this building different from like an office building? I mean, they're both made of bricks and, you know, like intrinsically, there is no difference. But this, when we come in here and we feel a sense of holiness, you go in an office building, it feels different because of the nature of what happens here, what the purposes are here. We understand that if you step back and think about it, it's like, yeah, we know that that's what makes it holy. It's not the bricks or the gold that makes it holy. Because other spaces have that too. It's the spirit. And that's what Malvin is saying. Like, we're coming in here from through God's abundant love, which fills everything. Like, that's what we bring into the space that consecrates, it sets it apart, or consecrate means associate with the sacred. It makes it with, connected with the sacred. Okay, Martha and then Courtney.
Okay, for me, what makes it holy is the intention and the focus that I'm going there for. And also the boundaries is not for God, it's for us. To avoid distraction. And it's interesting because I just finished a book that is called A Stolen Focus by Jonathan Harry. And it talks exactly that we are taught, that we are in prayer in the temple, and some people talk, some people chat in the telephone, and that it talks directly to that we are no longer capable of just focusing on one task. I invite people to read this book. It's called A Stolen Focus. But for me, it's the boundaries, and it's not God that we put boundaries. It's on us. The ability to concentrate, the focus and the intention to really get access to God, to be close to God.
Very nice. Thank you, Martha. Courtney, go ahead.
I feel that the bricks are really the foundation of man. That we need a space, but we do have to build. I also feel related to the material, that the acquisition of the material goods, if you will, is really manifestation of greed. And
Say that again, a manifestation of what?
of greed.
Of greed.
And sin. And more often than not, I think that people, they will seek to find some sort of happiness in buying material as that display.
Yeah.
And I think that, I think that is really the ultimate sin. Because if that's what you're going in life, and get the next, thing and show it, it's like what for? It's filling a void.
Yeah.
That, that I think people, good for any addiction, the shopaholic,
Yeah.
it's.
Yeah.
it's
Right.
not
Right. And there's also something about to follow on Vicky's concept of coming into the synagogue. The synagogue represents like a separation. Stu is saying to separation from the ordinary things. When the synagogue is adorned with all kinds of finery and so forth, like for the guy in the essay, it feels comfortable because it's affirming. It validates the world that he lives in, right? It validates that everything that happens for him outside in the other 6 days of the week, where he's working and earning money and driving his cars and shopping in the mall and whatever it is that we do, that's the sum total of what's good. And I know that because when I come into my synagogue, I also see that stuff, right? There's something that's like subversive about a synagogue that's like completely plain, like the one that's described in the Shoulder, because it subverts, and that may make the starkest separation between Kodesh and Kol, the sacred and the profane, and that you enter into the sanctuary and what's around you is not the usual. It's a whole different. It represents a whole different way of seeing the world, and the title of Mammoth's essay is also ironic and suggests them. It's called The Poor Shul. It's poor in money, but it's rich in holiness. That's the point that he's making.
What year was that written?
I'm not sure. I think in the 90s sometime. Early 2000s, but that's the thing I think that he wants to raise up here. Because we very easily, I think, and commonly without even thinking, associate, wealth with money, and that is one kind of wealth. That's the whole, the profane, the ordinary kind, but the Kodesh kind of wealth is different. Yeah.
Something I don't understand, I'd like you to clarify. When you said it's subversive to his thinking, am I correct?
No, it's subversive to the society in which we live.
That's what I meant, like he represented that.
No, well, yeah, no, but I think like a space or a synagogue that would say, like the Poor Shul says, here we do not worship money and things. Here we do not glorify wealth. And we don't, and that's demonstrated by the fact that we just have benches and a table. There's no plaques, there's no gold, there's no fancy craftsmanship, nothing. Just benches and a table says that here, those things which the society tells us are of ultimate importance and matter most, don't matter at all. So it's subversive of that worldview that exists outside the walls.
Thank you, that's what I thought,
Yeah. Okay.
but not as well.
Fine.
I remember when I was a little girl coming to services here. It was a fashion show. Everybody got new outfits for the high holidays. And you would sit there and watch, not just the women, but the men. And all the jewelry and all the, it was like, it was so different.
Yeah.
They would do the same thing after service.
Yeah, that's how it was in my scenario when I grew up. I was like people, and my mom, was talking about me. I don't know my mom didn't like to go. It's like all this big time anti-ostentation. In fact, like so she is proudly like the lore in our family, which I think is probably not true, but it's the story that my mom tells. Is that my first word was ostentatious. That's so ostentatious. That's so ostentatious. And with the those high holiday services, I remember. Ostentatious.
CT word.
Yeah, right. All right, let's, Shelley, I see your hand, and then we'll take Shelley and then we'll. Go ahead, Shelley.
Yeah, wow. I think I don't want to say flew out of my head because I want to respond. Is it Bonnie? I must have grown up in a more middle class because it was exciting to get something new for the shul on high holy days because, today people just show up in sweats or whatever. And isn't it part of, it's just for debate, isn't it part of something like this that is special, that you want to do something special? But what I did want to say was that one thing I think that I get out of having a building, because I've always been in a synagogue that has a building, although when we first started, some of them were churches and so on, is that it isn't just the physical holy space and the other people, but it's the memories. I mean, our old building in Glenview, I remember my kids being named there, the bar mitzvahs and everything. And now that we've had our new building, it's taken me a while to build up those memories. So when I walk into the sanctuary or somewhere, that's a huge, huge part of it, I think. And I don't know, can you get that if you're not praying in an individual place?
That's a good point, like if you don't have a fixed place, if you're wandering, to rental spaces. That's a great point, because the synagogue is the storehouse of the memories. I agree. And I think that contributes very strongly to the whole feel of holiness in the space. And then just to finish the last thing, Larry Hoffman scholar from Hebrew Union College, remarked that the synagogue is the holder of the Jewish conversation. Which I really like. So it's like the space, what we're doing here, we're continuing the Jewish conversation. And that makes the place holy also. All right, so everyone, thank you. We'll stop here. And thanks for your good comments today, and we'll continue next. Have a great day, everybody.
Great class.